there will be unharvested cropland. There's going to be some. Okay, you know, we got to bring in fertilizer. There was a shortage of fertilizer, and I had a map. I think it was in April, my report. It's a monthly report. Europe had 30 fertilizer plants shut down. Okay, I'm going to make a wild forecast because I like making forecasts. The Russians are going to rescue Europe with food supply and natural gas supply and oil supply. And they're going to have the Europeans crawling on their knees because they're going to face starvation and industrial collapse. And guess who's going to help that along? Donald Trump and Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Now, you mentioned Japan. Okay, everything is interwoven. Now, the yen's gone down, which means all their import costs are going up, and that's energy. They import over 98% of their oil. Now, you could maybe help me to get a more exact figure on that. All right, so Donald Trump comes in after invitation to help in the party, and Bessent at Treasury in the Trump administration sold a large stack of Euro bonds, which were predominantly French government debt, and he supported the yen. Now, if you step back from that, David, you can make an easy conclusion that Donald Trump is going to rescue Japan on the back of Europe and let it fall. That's heavy. That's very heavy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. And speaking of planets, you know, fortuitous events happen when planets line in the skies. So we have 6 planets in alignment and the Perseid meteor shower occurring at the exact same time. And speaking of fortuitous events, guess who's with me today? Dr. Jim Willie, golden-jackass.com, and the hat trick letter, an enormous amount of research going into that. We wanted to talk today about diesel and fuels, how this affects our society, especially food pricing, and how our world's going to move into just a different phase. They're trying to bring us into a new system here. How does gold and silver fit into that? How does cryptocurrency fit into that? Because we see the DTCC with all their tokenized equities and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and tokenized bonds. They're bringing everything in. Tokenized real estate funds. They're bringing everything into a fractionalized world. We're hitting 40 trillion on our debt. We just took over the Bank of Japan. So a lot of things don't seem to make sense unless there's another plan behind it. So, you know, just for me, from a 30,000 foot view, I am going to say they're locking the planet down again. And the gears and levers of our human existence are being turned off slowly so we don't revolt. So when you start to look at it in that sense of how things are operating, that it's not all discombobulated and it's just one weird event and people don't know what they're doing, I just can't agree with that. I think it's more of a planned, structured move to a new system, because the old one can't survive. You can't have parallel systems running together. You're going to have to choose one. And I think the old one needs to be destroyed to bring in the new one. So we're going to start right there. Jim, thanks for joining me. I know it's going to be an exciting show for everybody out there. Hold on to the seat. Get the back in there like a rocket ship.
That's a rocket for a launch. I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I have an interpretation that fits into what you're discussing. Now, this is the evil cabal heading upward with, you know, control and constant war and constant international tension. And here's a revision and a revolt led by Team Trump. And this is globalism and this is nationalism. And they're soon to meet in an apex, a conflict, okay? So we're going to have to choose. Are we going to use technology for social credit scoring and control and surveillance state and flock cameras? Or are we going to use technology for abundance and not elimination, but drawing down poverty, handling the homeless?
Unlike most olive oils on the market, Casandrino's is single source, organic, cold pressed from family owned groves in Greece. Never blended, not mass produced, not sitting on shelves forever, and every single batch is lab tested for polyphenol content. Farm to table, from their orchards to your kitchen. As soon as they pick these olives, literally within hours, they cold press them so you get peak flavor and health benefits. 100% single origin, organic extra virgin olive oil. That's what you want. Which offers a unique blend of potent vitamins that support immune, bone, and heart health without capsules or fillers. And the Mediterranean diet, you've heard about this for centuries, and the benefits of long-term wellness. From the family-owned olive groves in Laconia, Greece, straight to your taste buds. We should be supporting this type of business, family businesses producing clean foods that can get it to you directly. This should be the new business model for the entire planet. You should know your farmers. We need to have local producers that produce clean foods for us. The corporate chain, this isn't doing it anymore. So please support families and businesses just like this. That link's in the description box below, and it's going to be some of the best olive oil you've ever had in your entire life. Head over to casandrinos.com/David to put your order in there, or you can just simply click on that link in the description box below.
So we have a conflict of the good versus the evil. So we're approaching, we're probably 6 months away, maybe 9 months away from some kind of a gigantic clash. And I believe that the forces of good, David, are winning. And they are operating a lot with military security and silence. So we're not hearing much about what the victories are. They're capturing a lot of cabal creatures. They are sacking and confiscating their wealth. I have a couple, I don't have many. I have a couple of military sources. One is very talkative and one is not. One is rare, one is weekly. And what I'm hearing is there's trillions being confiscated. A big question is what'll happen when many of the jobs are gone and people need money to survive in their households, universal basic income. And I hear that there are $10 to $15 trillion waiting for that purpose. But I agree that we're working toward an end point. And that's what I regard to be the apex, the apex in conflict. And my litmus test, my indicator is diesel. And notice that we're not getting into the high danger level that we were in back in April, but we're still very near it. We're over $1 or like 90 cents higher in diesel compared to where we were during that ceasefire period. There's no peace talks. There's ceasefire talks. If you have a ceasefire that sticks, then you have a peace talk. But we haven't gotten anywhere near peace talk because London pulls their little hat nation lever and bombs the shit out of Lebanon. And that's how you get continuation of war, continuation of obstruction of the oil channel in Hormuz. Okay, there's a new phenomenon and people need to understand it, but there's a lot of oil that's moving and it's not going through the Hormuz. I just call it the Hormuz Strait, the Hormuz. It's going to the Red Sea. It's 5 million barrels a day for the Saudis going east and west. It's 1.7 million barrels a day going directly south to Oman from UAE. So, okay, there's still certainly a dependence on the Hormuz, but it's less. So now what we're seeing is the Houthis in Yemen, who are proxies to Iran, they're attempting and succeeding to some extent. They're bombing some of the oil facilities halfway up the Red Sea. So, you know, we're seeing multiple choke points, David, economic, commercial choke points. And you have to add the Bosporus from Turkey to the list. Suez in Egypt, Hormuz in the Gulf region, Bosporus in Turkey. For all we know, maybe the Gibraltar outlet is going to be jammed up before long? I don't know. It's a potential. The Malaccan off Indonesia, that's another one. That's calm these days. But I think the war is going to expand to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. I think the war is going to spread south of Odessa to the Bosporus Straits. Turkey is doing things to really anger the Russians and Putin. They're supplying NATO. They're supplying Ukraine with cluster bombs and drone parts. I don't have the exact information yet. The Russians are in trouble. They're not in dire trouble. They're only in, I think mid-level trouble. 750 miles inside another refinery. Okay, here's the military intel so you can put things into perspective a little bit. Just one point. The Russians are really good at defensive drone technology, and the Ukrainians, which by that I mean NATO, the Ukrainians / NATO, UK, NATO, Ukraine. It's funny that Ukraine and England are both UK, but whatever. UK NATO is very good at offensive drone technology. I am hearing that Russia stops 98% of swarm drone attack crafts. So 1 in 50 gets in. And they do a lot of damage. But it's only 1 in 50. And the launching points for the NATO Ukraine swarm attacks by drone, they're in Belarus, they're in Estonia, and they're in, let's just say, northern Ukraine, as close as they can get to the border, but Russia pretty much commands the border. The war has now extended in a huge way to Odessa, which is the Ukrainian port, and Ukraine is essentially going to go without any income at all from their agricultural output. It's all blocked. And their natural gas output. This war is expanding. Trump says we're easing up. We're working on the ceasefire talks. Well, the Houthis didn't get that memo. The Houthis are operating, okay, for those who don't understand it, I firmly believe 95% of Americans are just without any knowledge of the geography in the Middle East and Eastern Africa. And if you tell them the Red Sea, find it on a map, I think not even 10%, maybe not even 5% would find it on a map. Americans, where's Saudi on the map? Not even 5% would find it on the map. They certainly couldn't find Vietnam on the map, and they don't have any idea where Ukraine is on the map. Okay, so we're dealing with words and names, but I believe that this is going to expand to the Red Sea and the facilities on the port and the Suez Canal. Remember, the Suez Canal was a big issue in, I think, 2021. There was a grounded vessel, and it wasn't in the news. Okay, the news never reports the criminal activity of the cabal because the cabal controls the corporate news.
Let me add to a point to there. It seems that the news really is only there to condition the public for what's coming next. It's not about actually telling you what's happening in the news. It's condition you or pre-programming you, like they say. Well, Hollywood does the same thing.
That's true, but don't overlook that they tell 180-degree opposite of what's going on in many respects. I mean, they'll tell you about the weaknesses of Trump without talking about the successes of Trump. They'll talk about the weakness of the U.S. military with respect to this war in the Middle East. It's the entire Middle East, and they won't talk about the successes. They'll talk about the damage to military bases, but they won't talk about the strangulation going on. They'll talk about Iran surviving, but they won't talk about the revolution that's begun inside. Okay, I listen. Okay, there's a great quote that I heard. This is kind of funny. When you hear something on the news, you need to hear what they say. You need to hear what they don't say. You need to hear how they say what they say, and you need to hear how they don't say what they don't say. I think that's just so clever. How did they not say that there's a revolution inside Iran? Well, they hint at it. They talk about this. They talk about that. They minimize that. Okay, that's all very solid information. I deal with information. Some of the most fascinating things that we had in probability and statistics in my graduate school years was something called the information matrix. And it's a second order partial derivative of a likelihood function, whatever. But we deal with information, and in statistics we've got like limits of information with respect to variances. Oh my gosh, it's a wonderful theorem in probability statistics. That's what for your people in your audience, I have a doctorate in statistics from 1980. It's just amazing to believe it was 46 years ago. 46. Where did the time go? Well, I can identify each decade. They're marked with a distinct personality. Okay, this war is expanding, and Trump has been given, first of all, Team Trump was given false intel. They were also given about nuclear technology, nuclear potential, nuclear threat, and all that. They're also given false intel, wrong intel from expectation of how quick the war would be and how powerful and strong the Iranian resistance and defense would be. Okay, that's a well understood point now. And right now, Trump is being warned. This has to be resolved, or we're looking at global collapse.
Yeah, so you're talking about
make
the
some
Bosporus.
concessions.
Well, talking about the Bosporus there, so if you take Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Romanian, and Russian wheat offline and it can't export, then how does that dampen anyway global supplies? Because living out here in Asia, China is absolutely wrecked this year, and they just had another typhoon and passed Taiwan just a couple of days ago, right into their grain growing regions. They've been having tremendous floods all year. Their crops are down somewhere maybe 9 to 12%. They're going to be looking out on the market as well. You got Australia down in production. We are at 75 to 100-year lows. Once the totals really come in here with all the drought we've had in the Midwest grow belt on the wheat and rice all around the rest of the world, I mean, how's that going to push price? And you got these double pincer. You got diesel prices going up. I've heard some estimates of $10 coming in for diesel in America, no less. And you got the food prices increasing. People are just complaining across the net everywhere. And it seems this new system, because also here, Hong Kong just opened their repository. Now they built their storage facility for 2,000 tons, but they have 200 tons of gold presently, which means they're going to bring another 1,800 tons into Hong Kong in their storage. So something just doesn't seem to fit right here. We got grains shutting off, fuel shutting off, and we're moving to a new gold-backed currency or a gold swap available amongst many continents here, facilitated by China. So, so once you put those are the very bedrock. If you don't have food, you don't have a civilization, you don't have a society. I don't care if that 5-kilogram gold bar is laying next to you. If you're starving, it's meaningless.
I know.
Food is the most important thing.
You can't eat silver
coins.
coins.
More than a BTU, I think.
Yeah, you can't eat silver coins for dinner. If I was just talking to a colleague an hour ago about this very topic of I call it foodstuffs, crop output, farm output. I call it foodstuffs. It's the same as farm output, and we believe it's going to be on the order of 15 to 20% lower this year. Now, you're pointing out the various nations, and I appreciate that information, because I was focusing on the United States and the Black Sea output, which you very capably called Ukrainian, Romanian, Bulgarian, and Russian. The Russian output is down for other reasons of manpower. They've drafted men to go to the war, so there's less manpower in the steppes region, which is their gigantic breadbasket, several hundred miles east of Russia, east of Moscow, east of Moscow. They've got agri-cities they've got cities where all they do is grow wheat and corn and soy. Those are the big three, but they have more. And you know, they've got little boot factories, and they've got gas stations, and they got food distribution, you know, restaurants, and they got, you know, water and chemicals. And okay, but the little cities are agricultural output cities that didn't exist 50 years ago. Okay, that's all over central Russia, and their output, I heard that it was like 25% down. That's before any diesel issues. Okay, another military source input is that lines in Metro Moscow for gasoline are 1 to 2 miles long. Okay, now remember, 2% of the swarm hits, 2% of the swarm crafts are stopped. And you'd think, well, just shoot them down, like these machine guns that have 200 rounds per minute, or I'm sorry, but some of them are 50 and 80 and 100 per second. Shoot them down. Well, oh my gosh, there's one that's got in low, and bang, it hit a refinery. Okay, 1 out of 50 is getting through, and it sounds like, well, that's minimal, but they do tremendous damage. That's what the military source said. And he gets his info from CENTCOM out of Tampa, and the level of rank is major. And obviously they hold back on certain information. Right now, one of the big debated issues is Russian casualties. Okay, for those who don't understand and don't know much about Ukraine, I did a little calculation. It was about 5 years ago at the start of the war, and I could comment about the financial side of the start of the war in a minute. But let me just say that Ukraine is pretty much the same square kilometers, same area mass as Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois. 5 states. Okay, that's Ukraine for size. Okay, so if people say, well, Ukrainians out, but that, you know, that's pretty much equal to Ohio. No, it's equal to 5 Ohios. Okay, it's a very big country, and the eastern part is that's the area that Russia is commanding control of. And for those who don't know, I keep saying that phrase because there are a lot of people in the audience who do not understand much at all. It's eastern Ukraine that was Russian speaking. It was eastern Ukraine that had factories for tanks and half-tracks and jeeps and trucks for the Russian military. And when Ukraine became sovereign, that continued somewhat in trade. But when they began to entertain the thought of joining NATO, I think it's absolutely absurd that NATO would even consider joining NATO. Absolutely absurd. That's kind of like saying, well, we're going to have Guatemala join the Soviet Union. Excuse me?
Hola.
Hola, papi.
And let me say also the inland waterways and the ports right there, that coming off the Black Sea heading further inland, that's on that east side as well. Like that's a gem in itself to have that inland waterway. That's where some of the refineries were hit, and they had those oil spills coming down, and they were terrified that it would, you know, pollute into the wetlands and contaminate that entire water system coming out.
Oh, so it's already happening. In fact, I heard that 1 million barrels of oil Iran dumped in the Gulf of, you know, the Persian Gulf. 1 million barrels. Okay, you know how, you remember the argument? Oh, Iran's going to quit the war soon because they can't shut down their oil facilities. The Karg Island is full. They'll have to back it all up and shut it down, and 1/3 of their production will go offline because of just degradation of the oil well on the vertical structure. Oh, no. They didn't stop production. They dumped into the Gulf. They dumped 1 million barrels into the Gulf.
Hey, where is all this environmental debate too? You know, everybody's yapping about 1 degree, 2 degrees Celsius, whatever, but I don't see anybody talking about the war, the emissions, the oil, the pollution, the smoke, the sorties. We got militaries across the planet on full gear. I mean, the tremendous amount of emissions, and nobody silence.
What about your carbon morons? I call them carbon morons. Yeah. Hey, let's be serious. The climate change extortionists, they want to limit carbon dioxide so that they kill plant and tree life. That's their motive. And, what they're depending on is stupidity and ignorance in the public. Oh, carbon is bad. Oh, really? Tell that to a tree. Tell that to the blossom that's creating your corn. Tell that to your garden. Tell that to your hedge work that's so beautiful, outlining the edge of your property. Oh my gosh. Carbon is not bad. And neither is nitrogen. Okay, gosh, I get bristled with anger about the Netherlands calling nitrogen a pollutant. Oh my gosh. Have you ever heard of the nitrogen cycle, you morons? Okay.
Well, I identify as a CO2-starved jasmine tree. I can be anything I want now. Thank you very much.
Okay, why don't we focus on diesel, because diesel is the breaking point.
It absolutely is. And, again, we're coming into harvest season, and I can't reiterate this enough. If diesel's lean anyway, and if the prices do run up, substantially, $1, $2, $3 from here, and then heaven forbid we talk about trucking and shipping, logistics.
That's where I want to go. But, I think maybe if I can continue your point,
please,
we're not going to have the diesel to collect the harvest. There will be unharvested cropland. There's going to be some. Okay, we got to bring in fertilizer. There was a shortage of fertilizer, and I had a map. I think it was in April, my report. It's a monthly report. Europe had 30 fertilizer plants shut down. Where's their growing season? Where's their planting season? What kind of output? Okay, I'm going to make a wild forecast, because I like making forecasts, because when I do, and some of it is based, I got to be humble. I've got a colleague group. There's 7 of us. We used to be 9. We used to be 10, but London Paul we kicked out because he's basically a pro-China communist. Rob Kirby was murdered, and another guy died of a suspicious heart attack that might have been a London-based event. Okay, I've got a lot of contributions from my colleagues, but I'm going to make a forecast here. The Russians are going to rescue Europe with food supply and natural gas supply and oil supply. And they're going to have the Europeans crawling on their knees, because they're going to face starvation and industrial collapse. And guess who's going to help that along? Donald Trump and Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Now, you mentioned Japan. Okay, everything is interwoven. Japan is desperately trying to rescue and support their yen currency, which is doing a decline. The Japanese infused $50 billion worth to buy the yen and support their yen. Now, the yen's gone down, which means all their import costs are going up, and that's energy. They import over 98% of their oil. Now, you could maybe help me to get a more exact figure on that. All right, so Donald Trump comes in after invitation to help in the party, and Bessent at Treasury in the Trump administration sold a large stack of Euro bonds, which were predominantly French government debt, and he supported the yen. Now, if you step back from that, David, you can make an easy conclusion that Donald Trump is going to rescue Japan on the back of Europe and let it fall. That's heavy. That's very heavy. We'd like to see regime change in France and Germany and Netherlands just to start. Regime change. Then what? They're starving. Their industry is down. They got 30 to 50% unemployment, and they crawl on their knees to Russia. And Russia says, abandon NATO, shut it down. We'll supply you food. We'll supply you energy. Thank you for recognizing that we can save your decrepit, fascist nations, and then the European Union dissolves. Brussels is shut down. Okay, that's my wild forecast. How did you like it?
I can agree with that because I was looking at German gas storage, and they are at the lowest, I think, in the last 50 years coming into winter. They literally are well below. They're around 40% for the storage for the year. So you need to add in addition to the starving people and the lack of monies and unemployment.
Freezing people.
You need to add in cold, freezing, no heated homes people. And then, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity on it.
And green energy. Let me just make a comment about green energy. The emphasis on green energy is to collapse the industrial base because the morons will support it. If you go green, you're lucky to get even 20% of your energy supply nationally in a provision. So if you emphasize green and shut down your nuclear, you're heading toward collapse. And we're having an anti-green movement now, and it's a wonderful movement, anti-green. Trump is now funding 20 nuclear centers in the United States. Of course, it'll take 3 years to bring them anywhere near to production. This is very exciting. Okay, let me get to some diesel consequences because I focus on the economy, I focus on the finance, I focus on the currencies and banks. Okay, if diesel goes higher, we're likely to see a few major trucking corporations shut down in the United States. They're running negative per mile right now. And they got a reprieve in July, but it was very short-lived. Okay, if the diesel price continues up again, we're very likely to have less harvest because there'll be some farmers who say, it's just not worth it for me to go out and grab the harvest. And that's hard to conceive. But what they might do is they will harvest less. And that'll bring about some shortage in supply.
Well, Jim, let's say those farmers will take the crop insurance. And that's where you come in with that point there. Farmers will come in and take the crop insurance versus spending the time out there to lose money on a per acre basis, for sure.
Well, good luck with the insurance companies because they're not doing so well either. So I don't believe insurance is a salvation route at all, any more than bankruptcy for a trucking industry. So what? You get some insurance. I care about the output. Are the trucking miles happening? Are the farmers' bushels happening? The bushel volume it's the big three: wheat, corn, soy. There's actually an indicator. It used to be an indicator. If the beef prices go down, it means they're slaughtering more cattle than they wanted to. And that is happening because they can't feed them. Now, that whole issue has changed now because the cabal is murdering livestock. Do you remember 2 years ago the 10,000 cattle in Texas from a fire? Okay, that was not an ordinary fire. No, that was a murder scene. That was a kill. They killed Texas cattle. They're trying to bring Texas in line with the cabal priorities. And there's a pocket of Texas that's very much pro-China and cabal, and it's called Austin and University of Texas. And
Jim, and the screw worm too, to cut down production on cattle and isolate those, quarantine them, and destroy them as well. Add in one more on the camel's back.
Good point. Okay, diesel. Back to diesel.
Yeah, and proteins.
Yeah, I haven't thought about protein. I'm doing very well with my proteins, by the way. Diesel is needed for trucks. Diesel is needed for the military trucks. Diesel is needed for tanks. Diesel is needed for half tracks. Not needed for Jeeps. And I don't think it's needed for Humvees. Oh, golly, I remember like 18 years ago in this news. I'm in year number 23, David. I started in 2004. I noticed a story that the Humvees, those big flat Jeeps, powerful, wide Jeeps, stable Jeeps, they were getting subsidized $50,000 by the U.S. government. Okay, they're very expensive. And anyone who drives down the road with one, you got to wonder, how'd you buy that? Was that with a government subsidy, or was that your own savings? And remember, Donald Trump is pushing for a $1.0 trillion military budget. And he said, hey, while we're at it, can we make it 1.5? You know, we've got a monetization event coming, and it's going to be magnificent. If you're wondering what's going to take gold past, say, 5,000 and 6,000, we have a monetization event that's going to be unbelievable. If you're wondering what's going to take silver back over 100, launch toward 150, we've got a magnificent monetization initiative coming. It's the back end of the yen carry trade.
Yeah, and I'm surprised you're calling gold that low with such a large, like 2,000-year event coming at us, the largest collapse since the Roman Empire. Yeah.
No, David, I'm a practical guy. The price now is under 4,500. So I said getting above 5 and 6 and maybe 7,000. You didn't ask me where do I think it's going to go. Should it be? I'm saying getting above its current price. Okay, I got clients who say, Jim, what the hell is going on? Why can't we get the silver price above 75 and 80? It should be way over 100. What's going to get it above 75, 80, and 100 and launch upward is we've got a monetization event that's going to be unbelievable. We're going to print money. And if you think prices across the spectrum, like for your basket in the groceries or for your hardware or car parts or whatever, oh, no. It's going to be much worse in another year.
Shit.
It's sad. We've got two choices here, David. And I know you understand this very well. I say, David, not to say that, let me educate you, but I'm just talking to you. I'm really talking to your audience. We have two choices. Should we print money to cover the debts, or should we let the whole system collapse?
Depends what your outcome is going to be, and you in your game theory, where you're going to try to take this thing out.
No. We always print money. The inflation effect will be part of the breakdown. It's a crack up boom. Gold will go to 5 and 10,000. I don't have any doubt. Silver will go to 100 and then 200. I don't have any doubt. If it's 200, you're down to 50 to 1 ratio. And I think it's going to be a lot higher than 200 for silver. If you want, we could talk just about silver, because I think it's one of the most remarkable investments opportunity right now. But you raised a point. I don't mean to, cut you off on your own show, but yeah, they might not print money to cover the debt. They might let the system collapse and go to 10 days of darkness. But I think that is much more the cabal attitude. With the Trump attitude, it'd be more like, let's ramp up production and avoid that. Let's bring in tariff income. Let's bring in foreign direct investment. Let me just give a little quick lesson. The trade deficit is not the only part that matters. The current account deficit is defined as the trade deficit plus the investment deficit. So if we bring in, for instance, Japan announced a $3 billion truck plant in San Antonio, Texas. They're moving out of Mexico. Why would they do that? Could it be communism? Okay. $3 billion is coming into the United States. That offsets $3 billion in trade deficits. If we can get 30 more like that, we'll have $100 billion. If we can get SoftBank to come through on their original plan. Remember, it was about a year ago, SoftBank said, we're going to pledge $100 billion for electric plants, robotics, and AI centers. And then Trump turns around and says, we're going to slap a 10% tariff on Japan. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? Okay, so SoftBank stopped their foreign direct investment plan. Trump is a bit like a bull in a china shop with his tariffs. He needs to do it selectively, because right now he's wrecking the entire china shop. He needs to work on the communist part of the china shop and leave alone the capitalist Japanese side of the China shop. Tariffs have gone to his head. Okay, now I understand the 100% tariff threat to communist Canada. You can't just call it Canada anymore. You have to call it communist Canada. They've got troops in Alberta and British Columbia right now. Okay, back to diesel. Diesel is all through the economy. Now, in China, they've got much more of a train distribution system. In the United States, we've got a minimal train and a gigantic trust, which really pleases the Rockefeller hive. And if we have a very high diesel price, we're going to have a major problem with distribution. We're going to have empty shelves. And I'm not talking about food. I'm talking about clothing, car parts, hardware stores, you name it, lumber shops, lumber yards. When I go by a certain intersection here, David, I don't have a car. I'm a bicyclist and I'm stubborn, which means I have basically a 5 to 7 mile radius from my world. Unless I want to take Uber or a bus somewhere. I check the diesel price at a certain gas station. And it's down 10 cents in 1 week. That's good, but that's not much. It was $1 lower a month ago. We've got 2 cycles so far, David. I'm hoping we begin a 3rd cycle, and Trump actually has an interesting deal of defunding the Islamic militias. I don't know. I think he cut off their funds, and then he got an agreement that they won't be funded. I think it's a kind of a backdoor, very smart maneuver. There are a lot of financial channels for Iran that are being cut off. This is a very interesting war that has now spread to Japan. China, let me just a quick figure on China. 70% of their oil comes from the Gulf region, and 30% of Iranian exports went to China. So the two are very closely integrated. And what China did over the last 10, 15 years was invest billions and billions in the energy infrastructure in Iran in order to get a discount of I hear something like 10, 15% on the spot energy prices, oil and gas. And what Trump has done is he said that's no more. One of the most interesting questions I have for people is, what was the agenda? What did they talk about? What did they agree to when Trump went to China? That was what, back in June? What was the agenda? A lot of people just go blank. I don't claim to have all the answers for that question, but part of it was we want London to be cut off from China. And that's hard to do because the Rockefellers run the Chinese Communist Party. It's old Chinese families and the communist families and the Rockefellers. They're running it. Just a weird little fact. In the 1970 decade, David Rockefeller Sr. Made something like 50 trips to China and sired 30 children. They're running a Chinese Communist Party now. Have you ever noticed that some of the Chinese leaders don't look very Chinese? But, you know, Xi does. But many of his ministers don't. They're half
Jim,
American.
I'm wondering also, you know, during those discussions in that flight, do you think that China actually told them they're doing away with the paper, gold, and precious metals trade, where, you know, they exited every individual investor out. There's no more paper. And, you know, if you could go into that for a second, I'm just wondering if that was told to the delegation as well, like, you need to prepare yourself. We're going to cut that. Or was it an agreement and they worked on something together to come up with this idea to stop the paper trade in precious metals, to bring it into physical pricing and then set up those warehouses? I'm just curious myself.
That was July 24. Yeah, the end of the paper trade. China said, we're not honoring your futures contracts anymore. And since then, silver's gone from 57 to 65. That's okay. It doesn't seem like much, but that's 15%. That's 14%. That's more than 10% in 1 week. Okay, expect that to continue. Okay, China was told by Trump, stopped supplying Iran with anti-aircraft missile technology. Like their version of the Patriot missile. That's not accurate. Forget that. That's defensive. 5 aircraft from the United States Air Force were knocked down by Iranian missiles. Not Patriot. Just forget I said. I misspoke. A lot comes out of my mouth. Sometimes I have to correct myself. And China has resumed their supply. So that's an indication of hostilities coming back online between China and the United States. I think in the future, David, what we're heading to is the American Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Chinese Empire. And the American Empire is going to be the entire American hemisphere. We've cleaned up to some extent, not all, Venezuela. We've got great progress with Cuba, and that's not done. That's going to become a capitalist nation before long. They're going to export cigars, and they're going to export bananas and pineapples and a number of different things. They're going to have foreign direct investment coming into Cuba. Okay. Then we're going to see a conversion of Mexico, and that is the Don Road Doctrine at work. We're going to see the American hemisphere. China is going to be out. What I want to see is an end to Mexican and Chilean and Ecuadorian silver concentrate going to China. I want to see an end to silver and gold concentrate going to China. That is a very big pressure point now for Team Trump. And China's going to have their empire. And if we're not careful, it's going to include Korea and Japan. We've got to be careful. If we're not careful, it's going to include Malaysia and Indonesia. Indonesia is an OPEC nation. They're an oil producer. Indonesia has Grasberg, the largest gold mine on the planet. Okay. The BRICS nations, there's going to be a big fight for Africa. Okay. I said 3 empires. They're going to be battling over Africa. And, here's a prediction for Africa. A good indication is Zimbabwe and Congo. I just call it Congo. You know what I mean? I don't care what they call it, Democratic Republic. I don't care what they call Congo. It's Congo. It's the distress region where national boundaries are very blurry. I'm waiting to see whether the Zimbabwe dollar comes about and whether they go to a resource-based Zimbabwe dollar. I think there will be. I think it's going to be gold and diamond, perhaps. Can you imagine a Zimbabwe dollar that's backed by gold and diamond? Oh my gosh, they're going to be bankers for Africa. Oh my gosh, the last will be first. Unbelievable. And Congo, if they can get rid of the Belgians and the French and the British, they are going to be a wealthy nation. But that's a big if. And I'm not very confident about that because we got, I think 200 or 300 years of history of murdering their leaders and exploiting their resources. By the way, Congo is bigger than all the landmass of Western Europe. Just the Congo. Just the Congo. Not Angola, not their neighbors and, Rwanda or whatever, Union of South Africa, whatever, Ghana. No. Just the Congo is bigger than all of West Europe. Unbelievable.
It doesn't look like that on the maps, too. The maps are very deceiving in the way that they're drawn to make Africa look so small comparatively to what it really is. And Jim, can I ask you a quick question about silver and the Dore here?
Sure.
So you mentioned 15% on the move in the last week. So you've been in the gold and silver industry for decades and decades and decades. So to see 15% 20 or 30 years ago in a move, I mean, how long would it take for 15% to be moving? I mean, it seems like it's such a large amount in comparison. Like if you're going to do an average over 30 years, to see a 15% move in a week, how common is that or not?
Well, silver is very volatile. It had a 15% move in, I believe it was late June. I was at a little restaurant having 2 eggs and pancakes. I'm sorry. Once in a while, I like to give myself a little treat. So I went there and I called my buddy in Costa Rica. He's one of my colleagues. And I said, have you noticed silver? It went from, I think it was 60 all the way to 71 in just 2 or 3 days. It just fell apart. Okay. Then it went back down under 60. But right after the Chinese announced it's hard to put words on it. They are going to dishonor and disrespect and not follow any influence at all from futures contracts. Okay, they're going to, strictly metal settlement. If you look closely at the comics, by the way, they don't have much of any metal settlement anymore. Okay. If you look at the contract for futures, it says in force majeure, the exchange has the right to demand cash settlement.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been doing cash settlement on a majority basis since, I think, close to a year. There's almost no metal, and China sees that, and there are a lot of wealthy Chinese, and China is a very big country, and they got 5,000 years. What do you think they saved in their reserve system? Okay, it's the golden dragons, it's the white dragons, and there's a fund in the Chinese government. It's called the SAFE, like safe for safety pin, safe, SAFE fund. Strategic, administrative, finance. Okay, I used to know. I don't care what it is. It's the SAFE fund. It's loaded with gold, and it doesn't count in their reserves data. We only hear about the People's Bank of China, the PBOC, the central bank. Okay, what a bunch of numbnuts who do their financial nitpicking and analysis of central bank gold, and they leave out the SAFE, which I believe is 5 times the central bank gold supply. I never leave it out. China's have like 30,000 tons. I don't give a rat's ass what their central bank gold amount is. Okay, you asked how often? Well, we were stuck at 15 and 16 and 14, and people went to sleep. I got people bad-mouthing my own clients. What do we have to wait for? What's going on? No. How long do I have to wait? That's the question I get. And I reply to them, what event do you think we're waiting for? They want to know, when's silver going to go over $20? Okay, this is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. When's silver going to break 20, Jim? And I said, well, what event are we waiting for? I want to get a little discussion going there. That's really what I was after. I said, when the U.S. government debt is a problem, maybe when there's a military demand for silver, if there's other forms of demand, if solar ever takes off. I didn't even have electric vehicles in my radar. Okay, so we had it all come together: war, solar, electric vehicles, and silver zoomed past 20. Is it an accident? No. So I did a whole chapter once. I think it was late 23 or early 24. I did a whole chapter on solar farms. Where are most of the solar farms? India, China. United States has some, not many, solar farms. Okay, there's a place, David, in northwest India, where it's like 100 degrees and sunny, something like 320 days a year. You think they made a solar farm there? Uh-huh. Okay, we've got some in Arizona, California, Nevada, but we don't have very many. I'm not really big on solar farms. I'm big on 0-point energy with Tesla. And that's yet another silver application. I had one client say to me, Jim, I got to tell you, I saw a Tesla clip experiment for silver using silver. I saw that output. It multiplied tenfold. Unbelievable. You maintain a magnetic field, you run the silver, made of silver, you run the current, and it amplifies the wattage. And I said to him, you think we're going to see neighborhood Tesla clips, maybe a pack of 15 Tesla clips, and it'll power 150 homes or one big apartment building? He said, absolutely. Who's getting in the way of that, David? The electric utility companies. Now they haven't bought out.
Let me throw another one at you. Preparedness magnetic motors using magnets that push against each other to have, opposite disc spin and then get that, rod to spin as well. Like experimentation into magnetic motors, and the most popular model is the Preparedness magnetic motor. But again, that has been pushed back upon. Anybody who tries to commercialize it just ends up with something random happening to them. Earth's magnetic field to generate power for free with no pollution. That they've had that technology since, like you say, Nikola Tesla period and before.
I have to tell you a little story, if you permit me a few minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. It was about 4 years ago. A client in Virginia contacted me and said, Jimmy, I've got to do a consult call with you. I said, well, if you got something really juicy, you don't need to pay. Let's just talk. So we talked. He said, I'm the son of a Roswell physicist. My father was a Roswell physicist that did reverse engineering on the downed UFO alien craft. It was the late 1950s. I was 14, 15, 16 years old, 12 years old at the very beginning. I met Arnewick. Oh, I wrote them. I can't remember the names. I only remember Arnewick. There were about 4 names that he mentioned. I met them all. They were brilliant mathematicians and physicists. They needed mathematicians because some of the physics was so difficult. I didn't understand exactly, but they had also calculation. This is all pre-computer. He said they used Hewlett-Packard calculators. Hewlett-Packard made military-grade calculators that were programmable. Now that's what the advanced military had at the time. And he said something that a lot of people are going to have a hard time believing. And honestly, David, I don't give a flying rat shit, dried flying backward rat shit, whether people believe me. Einstein was the dumbest guy in the room wherever he was standing. They regarded him as a fool. They said he didn't invent or discover or develop anything. He was the guy who went to temple, who was put on stage to collect all the credit and all the adulation, because the other ones, the ones who did all the work and did all the discovery and the brilliant mathematicians and physicists, they didn't want to get killed. And they knew that Einstein would never be killed because he was the guy on the milk carton. He was the poster boy. And they said, Albert, why did you steal all those patents at the patent office? Okay. He said, okay, that's my little preliminary because I get very emotional about this. Einstein, he was almost nothing. These guys were brilliant. There are 5 of them. They were on stage every time and they were in the background and they were never named. We got a development and Arnold comes forward and he doesn't explain Albert Einstein, and he doesn't explain it very well. They were laughing back there. Okay, let's get to the meat of the story. The offshoot of the reverse engineering was 6 or 8 powerful methods of 0-point energy and telepathy based avionics, David. They would think something. The avionics on this craft were telepathic and they were driven by silver. Okay. They were told, and all the people who had information shared, there were hundreds of people involved in the project. You cannot commercialize this. If you do, you'll be arrested, you'll be debanked, you'll be punished, you'll be imprisoned, you'll be. Okay. I call this guy the farmer because they had the initials. I just call him the farmer. It's the silly. I am quite silly and illogical with my names, but they stick and he knew 10 people who violated, and he died a year or 2 ago. And I don't know exactly, like almost 90 years of age, 85. I don't know exactly, but he was a teenager in the 1950s. I was born in 52. So he was something like, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years older than me. And that fits because I'm 74. He died at maybe in mid 80s. He knew 10 people who violated the rule, tried to commercialize, like selling power packs or whatever. They're all murdered quietly. And word got out. and one guy escaped. This is really funny. I love this story. One guy escaped, and he went to India, where he's using his methods now to recharge Indian golf carts. And they're leaving him alone. He's doing just fine. But he's not expanding to go national. He has a goal to power the Indian mint to make a Tesla 1-ounce coin. He wants them to make a Tesla 1-ounce coin using free energy at the Indian mint, and they're not having anything to do with that. Okay, that's the one guy who escaped. All other 10, they're dead. Okay, that's what happens. That's what happens when you come up with a revolutionary device. So our revolutionary Tesla devices have to come out. They have to be born from crisis where there's no alternative. They have to be born of a crisis where the Rockefellers are not in the room to offer us a solution. And then, it applies to, the New York, Con Edison. They don't want a revolutionary new method. They don't want you to get rid of your smart meters. By the way, the smart meters, if you got one, you're paying twice too much for your electric bill. The calculation in the smart meter is to grab a high figure, average it out, and you get a double bill. Oh, wonderful. There's more to pay. I don't know how to circle back to diesel. I just look at it as my indicator of whether this war is going to get worse. And it's doing a holding pattern, David. I'm optimistic.
Squeeze you. Hey, let me wrap this back into Africa again, but I do want to have one point on Einstein. He wrote a co-publication, a co-author publication with Charles Hapgood. Now, Charles Hapgood, you might understand, is the Earth's crustal displacement theory innovator, but he, along with Einstein, had put that thought out there for public consumption through, no less, the CIA, and the CIA also with the Adam and Eve story. So there's a lot of strangeness interweaving with planetary events that can be possibly pointed back to with the electrical effect. Just throwing it out there for you Einstein and Charles Hapgood fans.
Well, if Einstein wrote something, I believe probably stole 3/4 of it.
Well, yeah, it was a co-author with Charles Hapgood.
Then I think Hapgood wrote 90% of it. And Einstein put his name on it in order to get publicity.
Yeah, right. Or something like that. They wanted it to fly. They wanted it to be part of the landscape to explain the turning or tilting of planet, depending on what you think the cause might be. I'm saying that they have to come to a zero state magnetic field on the sun, where Earth can come to a zero magnetic field state before any crustal displacement could occur. I mean, even if you have some large bolide hit, I mean, it would rip 1/4 of the planet off and it might tilt it a little bit. It's all magnetically driven. So you're going to have to come to a 0 point. And when I'm not talking about energy production, but I mean a zero magnetic field on the sun as well. And then everything in the solar system would go zero magnetic field. And that's why you get planets tilting in different directions. Just saying. I mean, electrically, that's the only logical course of that.
I think the electrical output of the sun is unbelievable, and it's not going to stop. What I'm concerned about is you called them CME, the coronal
mass ejections.
Mass ejection. Thank you. I was going to say mass emissions, but ejections. Those concern me because they have dangerous frequencies. I think they're gamma rays involved in that, and that could seriously disrupt our polar structure. I'm not really too well read about the polar issues. When a colleague of mine explained to me, sitting on his porch looking over a beautiful Costa Rican valley on a sunny day with iced tea and julep, it was fascinating. He said, we go through a dust and plasma field that is hundreds of millions and billions of miles long. And I asked, how many years does it take to get through it? He said he didn't really know, but he thought it might be 2 or 3 years, maybe a little bit more We don't really know. Historical annals seem to wipe it out. I don't think they're wiped out, David. I think they're kept under guard by the elite. They know it, and that's part of why they built the underground system. And Trump captured what was it, Mount Weather in Virginia, and they found 100-year supply of food, and none of it had any bacteria or contamination. No water had any contamination. So that's a food supply, by the way, that could come to the surface in case we have a very bad harvest. 100-year global human supply. We're talking about square miles of food stacks.
Okay. And you have to wonder if the carryover stocks are even legitimate, because, the USDA is always just trying to stabilize markets. So I've been questioning with others if the carryover stocks that they put in their publications on a monthly, if those are truly how much extra grains we have in storage, or if they've been lying and fibbing and they're pulling out of that to try to keep markets stabilized. And if it is, and we come into this lean period with harvest right now, and then the news comes out, oh, by the way, those carryover stocks weren't as robust as we've been pulling from them, then that's going to send everything into sort of an unknown at that point, because right now it's all based on what the harvest is going to be and what they had before. But if that whole previous number is, let's say, an accounting error, that's a kind way to say fraudulent.
I got a comment about food supply. You were mentioning food supply, in reserves. I think you're referring to raw food supply, like raw wheat, raw soy.
It is, that's correct. Yes.
I'm talking about
bulk,
Weather Mountain.
Bulk taken from the field, stored in the warehouses, in the silos, on the barges, wherever they can put it.
Yeah, it doesn't last long. It doesn't have, it's subject to mold. Okay, I'm talking about Weather Mountain finished products. I mean, sealed apricots, sealed mangoes, beef jerky, canned fruits, sealed, ready to eat. That's the kind of food that could come to the surface if we in the United States have a big problem with food. Now, does Europe have the same? I suspect they do. But I really believe Russia is going to come to the table as the rescue. They're going to be the rescue force. And, every once in a while, about once a month, maybe a little less often, I get a little data blurb from my favorite German client, who's perfectly bilingual, and we've done a couple of consult calls. He's a very good guy. He's a smart guy. He's very observant. He says that Germany is coming to the point where they're going to reject the government. They're almost there. They're almost there. The popularity of Merz is closer to 10 than 15%. The AFD, the Alternative for Germany. D is Deutschland, Alternative for Deutschland. That independent party, it's gaining. There's a lot of talk that they might not be approved for, even for candidacy to be on an election ballot, because that's how popular they are. He thinks the industrial base has gotten to the point where they're at a critical low, and we need to do something about it, or else our nation is going to die. We got decisions in Germany, he said, where Daimler-Benz and BMW are moving their manufacturing to China. So yeah, you get the brand, but there's no German worker making them anymore. Oh, you can't, that's not going to stand. Okay, so, and Trump is going to hasten that by selling Euro bonds to rescue Japan. Oh, I think this is going to be so dicey and interesting.
Hey, I wanted to bring you back to Africa just for a second here, because we were on the African thing. China investing heavily in Africa, and I was looking up online while you were talking there. Last year in 2025, all of Africa produced 1,050 metric tons of gold. So with the investment coming in, with China pretty much predominantly owning and investing in, because you were on the Congo there for a minute, I have my last note here. I mean, there's a lot of people that want that, and there's a lot of people who want to reestablish the Middle East as well under the greater project. But at the same time, they want to reestablish and, rezone, let's say, Africa. I mean, with China in the lead there, with all the investment and the different loans that are down there. they're just coming for the gold, or what are we seeing there? Because
No,
you got the
China.
Middle East being restructured, you got all of Africa being restructured, and everybody's after the resources or canals to bring resources out.
No,
Roots and resources.
my information is that China's after the entire spectrum. They're after industrial metals, iron, zinc. They're after structural metals, vanadium, strontium, titanium. Um, they're after gold and silver and platinum. I don't hear too much about China seeking agricultural output of Africa. Africa's going to have, there's going to be a greening of Africa. And what I'm hearing is that there are hundreds of aquifers down low, and they need to be brought up. I was talking with one particular fellow, and he said Uganda is going to be an agricultural powerhouse in the next 10 years. Now, I'm just waiting for it to start. He made a lot of comments, and I promise not to talk about them. But Africa is an interesting nation, and China has, I would say, they've got the big advantage right now. And Union of South Africa, they're in trouble. Oh my gosh, Africa is going to be a battleground, and Europe has a negative advantage, that very negative, because they had the French Foreign Legion, they had the Belgians, they had the British. France, Belgium, England, they ruined it for Europe. Africans will never trust the Europeans, never. That's why Russia is making inroads. They're in the Sudan. Russia is involved in that Trans-Sahara corridor from all across. That's over 2,000 miles. I think it might be 3,000, I'm not sure. Africa is very big, very big. I don't have comparisons, except I had a map once, David. It was Congo and all of Western Europe, and they were on top of each other. Just the Congo. Okay, I think the United States is going to make inroads. I'm not sure where. It might be Uganda, because there's a certain group in the United States that is attempting to fund the industrialization and water. I don't know what the word is. Waterification. What's the word?
Irrigation.
Oh, very good. The irrigation projects of Uganda, they're coming from a certain sector in the United States. A certain sorry, I didn't say that. A certain sector in the United. Sorry, I didn't say that. I lost control of my hand. Uganda is going to be green. They're going to be producing. They're going to be exporting. And they're going to be a model for Africa. Okay, who's going to be the financial leader of Africa? I think the Zim dollar is eventually going to have diamond. Maybe it'll be gold, platinum, and diamond. Don't know. I don't really care. But I think diamond is going to be in that mix to back the Zim dollar. And then they're going to become a banker for African economic development. We're going to see an anti-poverty movement in Africa. And I'm sorry to say China's going to have a good role in that. And I don't want to see it, because we're so preoccupied right now with the Middle East and Latin America. We're not paying sufficient attention to Africa, and China is. They're going to get their resource supply. It's mostly metal. And I left out rare earth. They're going to get rare earths in Africa. I don't know where they are right now, but there's some rare earths in Venezuela, Brazil. What I'd like to see Donald Trump talk about next is not so much Mexican conversion to capitalism and democracy. I want to get rid of Lula in Brazil. We never hear anything about Trump's plan for Lula. The Brazilian elections 4 or 5 years ago was terrible. Bolsonaro won. Lula stole it. They kidnapped Bolsonaro's family. Bolsonaro went to Miami. And here we are 4 or 5 years later, a BRICS nation. And Brazil's heading the BRICS right now. They rotate the leadership. Brazil's a mess. Brazil's a big narco nation. Okay, we got Venezuela because they were narco and communists. What about Brazil? Fits the same theme. Okay. David, I hope I added to your geophysics and water and earth and all your different themes that are wonderful. They're not my specialty, but they all touch on finance and economics. If we get a solar minimum event, we're going to see Canada migrate to the southern climes of the United States. Did you ever see a movie with Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal, The Day After Tomorrow?
I did.
That was gripping. It was tough to get through the whole thing, but it was gripping. And that Arctic weather came down, and I marveled at how it froze the helicopter's hydraulics, and they crashed. Okay, that was, they never really made clear what the temperatures were. They just said it was a sudden thrust. They might have a couple times. I don't know. I got the impression it was like 50, 80 degrees below zero suddenly, and it froze the hydraulics. Okay, that's what I think we're going to see, a gradual turn to that. I noticed 2 years ago. I'm a baseball fan. I remember it was, I think, 2022 or 2023. I can't remember. It was Chicago Cubs. Okay. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, and you're probably not old enough to appreciate Roberto Clemente in the 60s. He was a Puerto Rican. He was my hero. But it was Chicago Cubs, and all through April, they wore winter clothing in Chicago baseball at Wrigley Field. And going into May, it was like 40 degrees. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this the solar minimum coming? And now my conclusion, David, that was a taste.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to piece these two larger working gears together. If indeed governments in the world understood this change was coming, it would affect agriculture. Agriculture affects society, because if people can't eat, they get hungry. And then when they get hungry, they get angry, like let them eat cake. So if I was the world's government body here and I understood this change was coming in, I would also change how the economy operated before the event really hit at its full potential, that there was some market starting points. I would also create excuses so when people saw changes coming, that they wouldn't panic, that it was already baked into sort of media narratives as why we're seeing so many changes. Maybe it's not the true causation, but you have to put out, because people are going to see this in their front yard. Like you say, they're going to see it on baseball games. Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. Let me take you over to golden-jackass.com. You mentioned the newsletter a couple times, the hat trick. So I know you do a lot of research, or you do an enormous amount on that. So if you could explain to people, and the consult calls, you mentioned those a couple times too, wrap it up with that, please.
I got laid off from a consulting job that was lousy. Well, I used the spare time, because they underutilized me. I used the spare time to research gold and economics and what happened in the tech telecom bust of 2000, extended into 2001. I started a newsletter in 2004, and it was my administrative assistant, Donna, and she became my website manager. I started a newsletter. Okay. It has grown tremendously. It's had some ups and downs. We're in a down cycle now because of the economy being in an economic depression that's not being recognized. It's an inflationary depression that we're in right now. It's a cost inflation and a monetary inflation, both creating a vortex. Okay. I'm in my 23rd year. This has been a lot of fun. It's been very interesting. I never get bored by this. I'm in, as I said, month number 269. Okay, so I got a newsletter. Its name is not important. The website is golden-jackass.com. I have a newsletter. It's a monthly production, a monthly issuance. It's at the end of the month, the last 2 days of the month. But I focus on gold, silver, the dollar, energy, oil, gas, LNG. I've had a couple, little things about uranium, but that's not a focus. So the newsletter is monthly. golden-jackass.com. It's attractively priced. I got other newsletters who are out there and they're 50% higher in cost, 40% higher in cost. But I have time for consults. David, I'm not kidding. I've done close to 900 of them since January of 2000. We developed it at the end of 1999. It was a really smart British guy living in Alaska who said, Jim, you should do consult calls. People would like to talk to you. And I said, really? I'm just a jackass. And he said, no, they'd pay. So I started it and I adjusted the price and got something that worked. All right. So people, if they don't want a newsletter, they can sign up for a consult session. I got 30, 60, and 90-minute sessions. I give extra time. If we're on an interesting conversation, I don't say, hey, we're done with time. Sorry, we're done. I never do that. Never. Unless the guy is really boring. Then I cut it off. Well, we're kind of running low on time here. Okay. So I got the newsletter. I got consult calls. They're really quite informative. I would say half of them, I pick up information. And on that, I'll close. My newsletter is for people who are awake, who are interested in the news, interested in what's really going on in finance and economics, about the risk right now for this war. And I truly believe Donald Trump has been told, get this wrapped up before October. And he's trying. Okay. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I'll link that below so you can go over to Jim's site, check everything out on offer over there, see what you want to chat with him further about, get into the newsletter, all that goodness in the description box below. Do appreciate your time. Hope you got something out of our talk. Please put your comments below too, because I look at those, I answer those. And if any interesting come along, I will pass them along to Jim. But anyway, thanks so much for your time, and I will see you next video. Bye for now.
Okay, send me a link.